Welcome to Catastrophes. This is a podcast about disasters, why disasters happen, and the factors that make them happen. We discuss vulnerability, or the factors around a disaster that drive its effects. Today, we are looking at sinkholes in Brazil, particularly in the northeast region of Brazil in Buriticupu, which is a city that has seen a number of sinkholes in the last 2 years. So the intent of exploring all of these disasters and the ongoing events around the world is not to demean or diminish the experiences of people who face these traumatic events, but rather explore, question, critique, and ask why these events are happening. So with that, let's begin. Welcome back. We are discussing sinkholes. So today we're going to be looking at Buriticupu, kind of the context around the city and how it has developed, getting a little bit of information around it. We're then going to explore sinkholes and the phenomena that is sinkholes and how they're made. We're going to look at the driving effects for this particular sinkhole. What are the reasons why there's been a number of sinkholes over the last 2 years strike. And then we're going to look at just some of the mechanisms that can prevent sinkholes going forward for Buriticupu in northeast Brazil. So some context around the city itself. The city is in the northeast region of Brazil. It appears around lots of farmable land and lots of land that has been developed and been used by people. The interesting aspect of Buriticupu is that it was basically founded in 1994. There have been people living around that region for a lot longer, but the municipality was formed in 1994, and then it has since developed. What is interesting about Buriticupu itself is that over the course of this 30 years it has developed, there's been a number of civilians who have been in interviews over the last few years where they've mentioned there's a number of growing problems and problems that have not been fixed by the municipality or the local government. So that's the context, short and sweet. What's interesting about the sinkholes and the disaster of sinkholes is how they have come about. A lot of the information that I found for you today has been quite difficult to actually synthesize and put together. Whenever you Google sinkholes Brazil, Buriticupu, oftentimes it's actually just the articles that come up from about 3 days ago, and I'm recording this podcast on February 27th. Many of the articles don't necessarily give an exact date for the 2025 sinkholes. Many just assume it happened 3 days ago. Whereas I've been able to find a number of declarations of calamity. Whereas in Canada and the US, we typically will call them states of local emergency or a disaster declaration. However, we actually have to take a step back, and to get a full picture of sinkholes in Brazil, we actually have to go back to 2015, where there's a number of interesting articles. One of which was presented at a conference in 2015 in Brazil, and it discussed sinkholes and gorges that were occurring largely due to heavy rainfall. So the report suggests that in Sao Paulo, which is a popular region in eastern part of Brazil, across the municipalities of Sao Paulo, there was over 1,400 erosive processes, or holes that were beginning to grow deeper and wider. 1,400 sinkholes, holes, basically. But then that's the urban center. When we go to the rural centers, we actually see 39,864 erosive processes, where 593 municipalities saw a number of these ravines and gullies. That number kind of gives us context to this problem across Brazil, that sinkholes are something that they deal with. And it's worth asking, well, why? What is the primary driver of these sinkholes? And again, we just quickly recapping, a sinkhole is a void in space or a loss of the land where the land will basically collapse underneath. There's no integrity of like the soil below the ground, so it will just kind of pancake down and get destroyed. And a lot of the common rhetoric in media reports is that heavy rainfall is oftentimes the big driver. You know, the soil and the grass underneath the ground will basically kind of liquefy, and then it'll fall as a void in space. And then the secondary reason is erosion. And something erosive processes, but erosion is also commonly thrown about. But kind of going through it, rainwater will penetrate the soil and it accumulates on rocks underneath the ground. And this is a really important point, and I'll try to articulate how sinkholes happen through kind of, storytelling basically. But basically, water accumulates under the ground and basically on like the rock bottom, on the rock bed. And as water accumulates on this rock bed, again, under the soil and under the top ground, it'll actually saturate the soil above and it'll begin to weaken it. And as it's weakened, and as we begin to put roads, buildings, and anything with a little bit of weight, along with continued rainfall, the soil above begins to lose its integrity, and that's what causes a sinkhole and a vast void on top of it. So we see sinkholes that are like 10 meters, 20 meters deep. And if you just Google sinkholes in Brazil, you'll actually see some giant ravines. They don't look like sinkholes, they are ravines. So back in 2015, this problem it's occurring, and people are aware of it. And again, the common rhetoric at this point, I would say, is more in line of, well, there's erosion ongoing largely due to rainfall, but there's a little bit of us building roadways and so on. As we get from 2015 to 2023, going back to Buriticupu, we actually see the first declaration of calamity, where on March 26th, the municipality declares the public state of emergency due to 23 gullies that reach 70 meters deep and 600 meters long. And it threatens 880 people and 220 houses near the slopes. And over the course of 2 days, the municipality recognizes it as a state of emergency. Within the rhetoric of that 2023 sinkhole event, we see a lot of it actually be, again, caused by heavy rainfall. What's interesting is that, we've jumped from 2015, we talked about the university report and everything, and then we've just jumped to 2023. Back in 2022, there was actually a court agreement or a court order to implement a series of measures aimed at preventing further soil erosion and further erosion so that these sinkholes don't occur. But unfortunately, not enough was done. And in 2023, we saw the effects. A number of ravines, 70 meters deep, 600 meters long, threatened houses. This problem is not new. So, as we move to 2025, we start to understand that this problem is reoccurring because of erosion, because of heavy rainfall. But now I think it's time to discuss some of the elements that I think are quite clear, and there are more and more experts talking about them. But we actually see rapid urbanization along with the processes of deforestation, improper agricultural techniques actually be a primary driver of sinkholes in Brazil. There has been, Buriticupu itself, well, it was founded in 1994, and so it's experienced rapid development, but it's also experienced unequal land use planning, and that term gets thrown around a lot. So I just want to take a moment to kind of explore what rapid urbanization means, but it is where people will flock to basically urban centers, and houses will get built not really with a plan, or if there is a plan to develop a row of houses in a line, or a number of houses in the community, it might not be with consideration of any rainwater flooding or any flooding or any consideration for how close roadways and houses are, or any runoff with rain. So a lot of the time, rapid urbanization often entails we just need to build houses as quickly as possible because people are moving here and we need to sell. But what ends up getting missed is all of the hazards that can quickly become amplified as we begin to build human infrastructure. We talked about a few of these elements in the Valencia floods back in November. We know that whenever there is roadways, highways, basically concrete built over top of soil, it can actually help water run off, and water will not be retained in any of the green spaces. In addition, we talked about in the Ghana floods as well, that the removal of green space, shrubs, greenery, grass, and soil in this case, also helps with drainage, and it also helps prevent water from pooling in one particular area. So we see this again, Buriticupu, rapid urbanization, or just urbanization in general, with not as many land use plans as needed or longevity needed. And we see the effects where a significant amount of rainfall and deforestation has actually caused these gullies to be a reoccurring problem. So now we go to February 11th, which again is earlier than many of the media reports suggest. But I have the local declaration of calamity pulled up in front of me for Buriticupu, and it references February 11th, 2025. So this time, February 11th, sinkhole happens. According to local authorities, the factors that actually drove the sinkholes for this one is that there's poorly designed drainage systems, meaning that erosion is happening, but the drainage from people's homes, again, this rapid urbanization, because whenever you build a home, well, you not only disrupt how water flows on top of the land, but you also have to remember, what about the water coming into the home? What about the water coming out of the home, the drainage of it? Well, not only does that contribute to the erosion, but the inadequate drainage, along with the heavy rainfall, the poor street planning, which causes water to flow through gullies and the streets, it actually accelerated the soil erosion in this area, and it accelerated the formation of these sinkholes. So that's kind of the why. But just overall, approximately 55,000 people now face displacement of the from their homes in Buriticupu. And there are a number of reports to suggest that the municipality is actually contemplating expropriation, where they will buy the houses themselves of at-risk homes near these growing sinkholes. But 55,000 homes or people possibly being displaced is significant. And there's over 1,200 homes that are potentially being evacuated from the numbers that I've been able to find. But that is, at its core, what is ongoing right now. And it's interesting when you look at what are the solutions to this. They actually come back to kind of the development of our human infrastructures. So the same report from 2015 and another one actually culminate, and they suggest that, well, in Brazil, many of the drainage systems are not strong enough, or they are diverted in a way that they can't store enough rainwater or reduce the speed of water. And what ends up happening is they don't actually drain the water to a river or a stream. And then what ends up happening is it ends up pooling, and then it'll inadvertently cause erosion or these sinkholes to happen. So it's kind of this multiplier effect. Not only do we see this urbanization, we build homes, there's cause and effect of that, building roadways to get to our homes where water can no longer has a place to drain or a place to settle. It goes inadvertently one way or another. And then we also see our drainage systems, particularly in Buriticupu, where they're actually inefficient. And so by improving those, but also collecting rainwater, storage tanks, and tanks for just collecting the rainwater itself. That's actually how we can alleviate a few of these problems. And I think it's an interesting dynamic, just to kind of wrap up. But this disaster is clearly articulated by many of these news sources as, well, it's heavy rainfall and it's just a product of heavy rainfall. But a number of these factors suggest that it's actually because we didn't do long-term planning. We have been focusing on the short term, getting people here, but then also building a system that might not be good long term, or we might not have had the capacity infrastructure to actually build it for the long term. And that's kind of the case in a lot of places that experience these disasters. And it kind of goes back to the overall theme of this podcast, which is the factors that we control are oftentimes the ones that drive these disasters and drive the effects of them. So, kind of wrapping up, land use planning, development of a community, making sure that waterways, drainage are good, for as many times as I've mentioned that, is going to be a huge factor in solving the sinkhole problem across Brazil. Quickly recapping. 2015, there's a report. It suggests that, well, there's a number of sinkholes that have happened and gullies and ravines, and they may continue to happen. And it's largely due to this process of erosion. And over the course of a number of years, we see some courts say, well, we need to fix this problem. 2022, there's one court in Buriticupu that says, you fix this problem, we need to make sure that our citizens are safe, that they can live in this area without feeling threatened. 2023 rolls around, they did not fix their drainage systems nor this erosion problem, and a number of sinkholes that are massive begin to appear. Fast forward to 2025, we see the same disaster occur again. And so I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think about what this will look like in the future. Will these ravines and sinkholes begin to become more pronounced under many of the homes and go towards the urban centers? And that's something that we have to hope that the municipality of Buriticupu can manage, and that they can expropriate, or they can get people safely out. So with that, I hope you enjoyed today's interesting episode. It was certainly interesting analyzing this and reading about this. This phenomena, it's not something that you commonly see as a disaster. So there was a lot of things that I certainly learned. But I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that there are many people across Brazil that are slowly becoming threatened by this gradual disaster, or this gradual hazard that is becoming a disaster. So taking a moment to recognize that the actions that we have as humans and in our governments, they do make a difference, and we can make a difference. So with that, ending off today's episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. Anything really helps. Next week, we're going to be exploring flash floods in New Zealand, among another disaster, if I can find enough verifiable information on it. And if you have any disasters that you want reviewed, or any questions that you have, please feel free to email me at catastrophepodcast@gmail.com. And again, I greatly appreciate people's support and them listening. Thanks.